The following presentation is made possible by a grant from the insurance firm of Lester Smart, Fairman, Tremmel, and Arndt, 210 9th Street South, and by the Southwood County Historical Corporation, 543rd Street South, Wisconsin Rapids, Wisconsin.
I'm Paul Gross.
And I'm Phil Brown.
We'd like you to join us today as we uncover some more of our wonderful history of the past. Phil, before we get into some of our favorite topics, I'd like to take a look at what local folks were doing at a time when very important world events were taking place.
I'm confused. Give me an example.
Okay. Let's go back to April 18th of 1906, when the news media was flooded with information about the devastating San Francisco earthquake. Of course, there was no TV at the time, and news publishers ran overtime to keep up with the demand for information.
Meanwhile, on that eventful day in 1906, our local news outlet, the Grand Rapids Tribune, was covering these local stories. Old council passes out of existence. Newly elected takes their place. Immigration talk. E.T. Wheelock addresses our citizens on the subject of settlement in Wisconsin.
Front page stories ran together in those days, and ads on the front page were very common.
Like this Johnson & Hill ad that boasts of their fine quality Hart, Schaffner & Mark suits priced from $2.50 to $5. The latest fashion in men's shoes, the Crowset, was featured at Kruger & Werner's store. Front page news, Mr. Schumacher put new plate glass windows in his grocery store measuring 9 by 12 foot 2 inches. They are the largest in town because he changed from 2 doors to 1. Another front page item tells of a new split log system that will be used to drag the streets.
So that's some of what was going on in our fair city on April 18th of 1906. As for the San Francisco earthquake, that news must have arrived late, because here's how it appeared on page 3 of the paper.
I've got one for you. May 20th of 1927, a young Charles Lindberg takes off from Roosevelt Field in his single-engine aircraft, the Spirit of St. Louis, in an attempt to cross the Atlantic Ocean by air.
Let's go for it.
The Spirit of St. Louis was removed from its hangar in the early hours on that rainy spring morning of 1927, as young Lindberg decided it was time to go. It would take a lot of gas to keep him in the air for more than 30 hours. As he raced down the runway that foggy morning, the plane seemed almost reluctant to leave the ground. Then, at last, he was airborne, narrowly missing utility wires and treetops. He was on his way. Hopefully, the next stop would be Paris, France. Lindberg's Takeoff made Daily Tribune headlines on that Friday, May 20th in 1927, and it shared the front page with these noteworthy stories. Post office heads pick city for their annual meeting, subtitled, Wisconsin Rapids will entertain first and second class postmasters of state in August.
Then there was this front page item about a woman in Chicago sentenced to be hanged at the gallows for killing her husband to collect his insurance.
Lindberg landed triumphantly in Paris after 32 hours in the air, where thousands of cheering spectators had gathered to greet him. And the media of May 21st, 1927 went wild, earning him the title of Lucky Lindy. Right here in our local newspaper was covering the Lindbergh story with this headline, Captain Lindbergh reaches Paris goal. Lucky Lindy was the main topic of local conversation, but on our local front page on that eventful day were these stories. Public is invited to watch referendum ballot count concerning the dismissal of S.G. Corey, principal of the county agricultural school. Another important item, 9 people in hospital following auto accident. 2 or 3 are near death at Marshfield. All are Milwaukee people. Car struck loose dirt on Highway 13.
Another seemingly important item, Madison strikebreakers attacked by Union men. And then there was this item on the front page, Gulf widow granted a divorce in Madison. So now let's move up a little and pause at 1929, a very eventful year.
Right here in Wisconsin Rapids, a 1929 issue of the Consolidated News was toting our pride of a new and extended East Grand Avenue. It was late summer. Mayor George Meade is shown here with City Engineer Chester P. Gross, expressing approval of the final section of concrete. This view of the finished project is far different from how it is today. At the time, East Grand Avenue was connected to Birch Street in a way that made convenient access to what was then Lincoln High School.
The dome of the old Lincoln High School is visible, soon to be replaced by a beautiful new Lincoln High School and field house. The old water tower was still a part of our skyline. So here we are, 83 years later, changed in ways that people in 1929 could not have imagined.
It was the fall of that 1929 year. People were optimistic. Detroit had built 5.3 million cars, and Henry Ford had just produced his millionth Model A, introduced 1 year earlier. The post office was promoting airmail as socially correct. The future looked bright. And then suddenly, Black Tuesday, October 29th, 1929, the bubble burst and Wall Street collapsed. The news came too late in the day for our local paper, but on Wednesday, October 30th, the Wisconsin Rapids Daily Tribune put it this way. President Hoover told us the economy was solid, but it was the start of the Great Depression.
As the economy worsened, there was little to look up to, unless you considered the great dirigibles that once captured our imagination, the German Graf Zeppelin and the Hindenburg. For the first time, paying passengers could cross the ocean in luxury and comfort by air.
American airships were the Los Angeles and the ill-fated Navy airships, the Shenandoah, the Akron, and the Macon. It was the Hindenburg disaster that finally sealed the fate of these beautiful airships, and brought an end to the era of these great ships in the sky. But getting back down to earth, the Depression continued to worsen.
Here at home came a bright spot when in the early 1930s, Consolidated Papers perfected the high-speed Massie coder process and installed a beautiful new No. 5 paper machine that produced paper for Life magazine. Time Incorporated had introduced us to the first weekly photojournal publication on January 31st, 1936. Life magazine. Life eventually reached a weekly circulation of over 13 million copies. Obviously, it was a powerful asset to the area, sending Consolidated Papers on its way to becoming the world leader in coded papers.
Speaking of Life magazine, in the 30s through the 60s, Life magazine was the leader in magazine advertising, like this 1937 Christmas ad for Camel cigarettes. The lady pictured was Joan Crawford, a popular movie star at the time. The ad also refers to Miss Crawford's latest feature film, Mannequin, which was running at the local Palace Theater.
Cigarettes were 20 cents a pack in those days, and some complained if they went any higher, they'd have to give up smoking.
One week of each summer, the local theaters had stiff competition from a traveling tent show. This July 1940 photo pictures the tent of the Robson Players, which was set up each year in the area near 4th Avenue and Jackson Street, where much of the paper mill is now located.
Each night, the tent show featured a different dramatic presentation. On Saturday and Sundays, they ran matinees. Robson Players, long gone, and except for this photo, almost forgotten.
It was about this time when the clouds of war began to darken. We had tried to remain neutral, but by 1940 we were deeply involved in supplying war materials to England under the Lend-Lease Agreement. We knew what was coming. We had to be ready.
It really hit home when in October of 1940, our local National Guard troops were called into service.
This was their send-off on October 19th of 1940, as folks gathered at the East Side Market Square to wish them well and send them on their way. Shown here is the convoy that headed south to Louisiana. Our local boys were destined for battle. Soon, women could join the military in their own non-combat roles as Army WACs and Navy WAVES.
Mass production of aircraft brought a high demand for aluminum. This July 1941 cage near the Flatiron Building was a new collection point for discarded aluminum pots and pans and other aluminum items. December 7th was just 5 months away.
The rest is history. Pearl Harbor, Normandy, Bastogne, Iwo Jima, and so on. Right here in River City, we had a German prisoner of war camp located at the Tri-City Airport, now Alexander Field. Then on May 8th of 1945, Germany surrendered. It was VE Day. This is how the Armed Forces newspaper Stars and Stripes put it. But surrender or not, our German prisoners were still at work, as shown here, pulling weeds at Potter's Cranberry Marsh. Notice the P on their trousers.
Then, on August 14th, 1945, it was all over. President Truman made the announcement at 6 p.m.
Our Wisconsin Rapids Daily Tribune immediately went to press with a 7 p.m. special edition and this headline: "Church bells rang, people were dancing in the streets, everyone rejoiced." That special Tribune edition also included pictures of 38 from the area, some of many who had made the supreme sacrifice to make this day possible.
Phil, how well I remember that 6 p.m. announcement by Harry Truman. I was running projectors in the movie theater, theater number 5, on Brew Field, when the announcement came on. I had a radio in the booth, and as soon as Truman announced the end of the war, I opened the porthole and hollered out to the audience, "The war is over, Truman just announced it." And that theater went up with a cheer so loud it would make a deaf man deafer. And out they scattered all over the place, and the thing was empty. There was no reason to run the movie any further because there was nobody to look at it. But a very interesting thing happened that the news media has never repeated since that night. When the announcement came into the State Department, the message was sent by a gentleman on a motorcycle to the White House, so the president could make the announcement. And what they've never remarked about since was the fact that on the way to the White House, this motorcycle driver was stopped for speeding. And of course, as soon as they knew what he was rushing about, they let him go. But that's never again been told. So you heard it now.
Interesting.
For the first time.
In this first edition of this August 14th, 1945 Daily Tribune was this item. Printing of ration books is stopped by OPA. But folks were advised not to destroy their old ones just yet. Preway was still advertising for workers, and Frank Gill was promoting his Factory to You paint for just $3.13 a gallon.
With the return to peace, and as our boys and girls came home from war, on the east side Market Square, where folks once gathered to send them off to war, now children gathered with their decorated bikes, buggies, and wagons for a kiddie parade.
Even the movies were lighthearted, like this 1946 production, Two Guys from Milwaukee, starring Dennis Morgan and Jack Carson. The only sore spot was a waiting list for new cars and tires. As we moved on into the 1950s and 60s, the local landscape would begin to change. On Baker Street, our old Wood County Jail and Sheriff's Office was soon to vanish when a new courthouse was to be built. The sheriff's residence was also part of the building. Just at the bottom of the Baker Street hill was the old T.B. Scott Public Library, also a memory of the past. A turn to the left reveals even more change that was soon to follow.
Well, Phil, now that we've got it going in that direction, why don't we stay with it for a spell?
Sounds like a good idea, Paul. You know, there are so many local folks out there that lived elsewhere in those days or weren't even born yet that especially enjoy that part of the videos.
All of which gets us back to where we were in the last presentation when we promised more of the same, how we've changed. From time to time we come across old photos that require a little research to identify the location and the time period. To find the answer can be very rewarding, so why don't we select a few and have a little guessing game?
Okay, let's start with this Don Crone photo of a fine old local residence. Don's camera was facing west when this picture was taken. Few can recall this location, so I'll give you a clue. This home was one of two on this street removed in the early 1960s to make room for what today is a very much utilized public facility. The second home, as shown in this picture, was already in the process of removal.
In those days, houses were salvaged. Nowadays, they knock them down.
In any case, if you haven't already guessed, these homes were removed from their Lincoln Street location to make room for a beautiful new Macmillan Memorial Library.
My, how we've changed. Another local landmark was the Brown Derby. Do you remember where it was located?
Built right after World War II, our local Brown Derby was a cocktail lounge and entertainment establishment, undoubtedly named after the famous Brown Derby in Hollywood. So where was it and what happened to it? It was located on the west side of the river, right about here at 644 West Grand Avenue. The building was demolished to make room for relocation of the roadway as we know it today.
How about this Don Crone photo taken about 1950? Where is it? And what are those two buses doing in the picture?
The location was called Shank's Corner, located between Wisconsin Rapids and Port Edwards, where John Shank had a gas station, which was also home base for his bus lines. In the late 1940s, Shank sold the business to Richard Kelvey. A few years later, Kelvey bought the two buses in the picture and for a time used them for service between Nakusa, Port Edwards, and Wisconsin Rapids. Kelvey also ran a bus line for Consolidated papers between Wisconsin Rapids and Burin to accommodate mill workers, as well as school buses and charter services.
Now back to Rapids as our camera stops at this once busy location. This gas station was once a part of the Johnson & Hill department store.
And where was it located?
Right here on the southwest corner of 3rd Avenue and Jackson Street, which now serves as a parking lot.
My, how we've changed.
Phil, as we've done in the past, I think this would be a good time to pause and drop in on one of our local, standalone, one-of-a-kind businesses and find out what makes them tick.
I knew that was coming, and I'm all ready for you. At one time, we had a number of independent, standalone bakeries in Wisconsin Rapids. Today, we have just one. Gremler's Bakery on West Grand Avenue.
Well, I'm sure the folks at Gremler's wouldn't mind if we stopped in for a spell.
Let's give it a try. Hello, my name is Phil Brown. Today is Wednesday, October 24th, 2012. We're here at 1811 West Grand Avenue at Gremler's Bakery, one of the last independent freestanding bakeries here in the Wisconsin Rapids area. Today, I'm here with Stephen Gremler. And Stephen, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
And thank you for joining us today.
Thank you.
And how long has Gremler's Bakery been here on the west side?
Well, we've been here since 1979, so it's been about 34 years.
34 years.
Mm-hmm.
And who started the bakery back in 1979?
Well, my father Gerald and my mother Susan have started the bakery together in 1979.
And so pretty much your mother and father have been involved in the business since day one.
Oh, very much.
And currently working here. Who currently works here?
My sister Teresa and my mother Susan and I are the only ones that work here, correct?
So all family members.
Yep.
All family members. Now here we are in the fall of the year, and what are some of your specialty items that you're featuring these days?
At this time of the year, we like to go with cranberry stuff. So cranberry custard pies is one of them. and then we like to do cranberry bars, and then we do our cranberry white chocolate cookies. So we do that, and then we also have our pumpkin oatmeal cookies. Them are a good one, and soon we'll be starting up our pumpkin pies.
Oh, great. Now, how has, now you've been involved in the business since you were a young boy. How have you seen the industry change over the past 30, 35 years?
Well, for us here at Grumblers, it's been pretty much the same thing. I've stuck with all the recipes and stuff that my father had started with, and we kept it kind of small and stayed with that. And it's been successful for us, so we've stuck with it.
Now, what I always like to talk about is your hours of operation of a baker. You don't you don't do a 9 to 5 type job. So can you explain a little bit about your average day for us?
Okay, I usually get here around 4 o'clock in the morning, and it's quite a busy day. You're pretty much staying steady and busy, and it's usually around 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Sometimes it's a little later and stuff. So, and then I try to get to bed around 8 o'clock. So. Okay.
Now, with the holidays coming up, is that traditionally your busiest time of year?
Yes, that's our busiest time of year. Christmas is the busiest. Then Thanksgiving and Easter are also very busy holidays for us. Mm-hmm. So Christmas is our big one.
Oh, good. Now, your father started out in the bakery business a long time ago. And can you tell me a little bit about his early days in the bakery business?
Oh, sure. Yeah, my father had came up here after he graduated from high school, and he worked with his uncle, Pete Hamers, and they had a bakery, Hamers Bakery, on 8th Street, and that's where he got his beginning, his start, and then he worked there for several years, and then my mom and my dad started running the bakery in '79.
Yeah. Now, back in the good old days, there were lots of other bakeries in town, and rarely could you buy bakery goods at the grocery stores. So, do you remember some of the other bakeries here in town?
About the only bakery that I remember is the Rapids Bakery that was right down town in Grand Avenue. I know before my time there was a lot of bakeries. I don't remember the names of them. Mm-hmm. So, at one time there was a lot of bakeries.
Now, looking to the future, what do you see on the horizon as far as the bakery industry is concerned?
It's hard to tell. For us, it'll probably stay basically the same. We do all our baking from scratch. Everything we make here, we sell. And I know there's other bakeries that have gone more into the modern media stuff. We've stuck with the word of mouth as a good advertisement, and it seems to be working good for us.
Yeah. Oh, that's wonderful. Well, it certainly has been a pleasure meeting with you today, Stephen, and we certainly wish you well into the future. And with the holidays coming up, I'm sure we'll be seeing more of you here at the shop.
Oh yeah, it'll be a busy time.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
As always, you did a great job with that interview, and more than likely stimulated a few appetites.
Especially the sweet tooth. Every now and then, folks ask me if you have any favorite sequences in all those 25 local history videos that you've done over the years.
Well, I've been asked the same question, and indeed I do.
So why don't we review a few of them? I'm sure folks wouldn't mind seeing them again.
Well, I've been thinking about that, and it occurred to me that they would fit perfectly into our How We've Changed sequence.
Wonderful. Let's go for it.
Without a doubt, my very favorite in the series would be a sequence from Railroads and Industry, which I produced way back in 1975. First National Bank was the sponsor at that time, and Bill Nobles was my narrator. There was no video. It was all done with 16mm movie equipment, a very complex system.
The
This is where I set up my 16mm movie camera about 8:20 a.m. in the late 1950s to record the end of an era when the last steam train would leave Wisconsin Rapids on the Chicago and Northwestern Railroad. Here's how my narrator, Bill Nobles, described the scene.
Here at the Northwestern Depot, we take you back to the summer of 1950 to experience the closing days of the steam train in central Wisconsin. This was the morning passenger as it arrived from Marshfield on its daily run to Fond du Lac. It would be the last trip for this belching iron horse, and rail fans were on hand to join in its final departure. The hissing valves, the smell of cinders and steam would now become a memory of the past. A diesel would replace the steamer, and in a few years passenger service on the local branch would also be a thing of the past. Old-timers would never again see the familiar cloud of billowing smoke leading a train across the Great Bridge, which had been built in 1901.
All of this is now Riverview Expressway.
Prior to that day, in anticipation of discontinued passenger service, Paul captured the train at 2 other locations.
I perched in a tree with my camera out by Lake Wazicha to catch the train as it crossed a small trestle over the 4 Mile Creek. I was even lucky enough to catch the engineer releasing excess steam pressure.
Then there is this location, which is best identified by Riverview Hospital and the Expressway. Certainly it was nothing like this back in the 1960s when you had the foresight to capture the train as it steamed its way east that summer morning. It's really fantastic. I can see why that's one of your favorites. Now, what else do you have for us?
I'm always amazed at the number of people who tell me they just love seeing clips of the old Johnson & Hill department store in these videos.
I've been told the same thing too, and also from people who weren't even around when Johnson & Hill was in business, asking what it was like.
Okay, at the risk of repeating some of the footage, let's take another look at a busy Johnson & Hill department store, the way it was 55 years ago. The year was 1957.
Before we go inside, let's start with this outdoor sequence of one of the earliest ridiculous days when the event was much more vibrant than it is today. Even the boss got into the act. This was Johnson Hill President Chet Bell, who eventually became president of the Wood County National Bank, now Wood Trust Bank. His son Steve was too young to participate in this event. Steve is now president of the bank.
Ed Brado was a store comic. He liked nothing better than to dress up in a costume and have fun. "1957 certainly was a wonderful year. It was a time when Wisconsin Rapids was one of the fastest growing cities in the state.
Moving inside, this is a view from the balcony, showing a portion of the main floor, which was well stocked with clothing, sportswear, hosiery, cosmetics, stationery, and fine jewelry.
As a matter of fact, this was my leased jewelry department, which I sold to Bill Johns in 1958 to to pursue other plans.
The first floor was also home to a fine footwear department and shoe repair shop. The first floor sports shop featured everything from fish hooks to boat motors. The men's department was the place to go for top brand menswear and good service. And believe me, it was fast. Ed Brado often sent pants by air to be altered by Emil Beck, the store tailor, on the balcony. Up, up, and away!
Speaking of up, Susie DeWitt was the elevator operator. Mentioning Susie, I shot this sequence of Ed Brado and Gordon Soley measuring her up for a sweater. The sequence was accompanied by the music of a popular tune of the day, Wake Up Little Susie. Seems like there was always time for a little fun to help break up the day.
On the balcony was a great lunch counter where employees gathered for breaks, and local patrons were treated to everything from a good cup of coffee to a home-cooked meal. On one occasion, even lobster tails were served as a special of the day.
But what I remember most is how the employees gathered here before the store would open.
A large portion of the balcony was the location of offices and management facilities of the company. Proxita Gala, on the right, with her back to the camera, ruled the roost with an iron hand and knew every customer by name.
There were no computers or electronic calculators in those days. This is as good as it got, as two employees manipulate the Elliott Fisher accounting machine. It took a lot of people to manage the Johnson & Hill business, and they were all accountable to Proxita.
The tube system was then state-of-the-art. This lady checked the slips, made the change, and sent it on its way back to the clerk and customer. The switchboard operator took the incoming calls and directed them to the various departments. There were no dial phones at the time.
The Johnson Hill third floor is where you would find an extensive inventory of ladies ready to wear, coats, dresses, undergarments, and so on.
The third floor was also home to fine furniture, flooring, and small appliances, and a great place to hang out for an occasional gab fest. Certainly it wouldn't be fair not to mention that Johnson & Hill had a very wonderful grocery and meat department. Located in the basement of the store was one of the best patronized grocery stores in the area, where two full-time butchers cut your fresh choice meat to order. No pre-packaging stuff, and friendly clerks to assist customers like family.
Out of this, just one more reason why folks who remember still say, I sure miss Johnson & Hill's department store. But that's the way it was back in 1957.
Just one more reason why they call it the good old days.
Well, Phil, there's much more to be said, much more to be shown. But for now, we'll call it a wrap until next time.
Since this is number 26 in this series, I guess we could call it Z. The alphabet is complete.
But that doesn't mean it's the end.
I know, because
Our history well never runs dry. So for now, I'm Paul Gross.
And I'm Phil Brown. Thanks for listening.
Having seen this program, would you like to invest in your heritage? For just $20 a year, you are invited to become a member of Southwood County Historical Corporation. Your contribution will assure continued research and preservation of our past. As a member, you will receive Artifacts, our quarterly publication. Artifacts is chock full of local history, memorabilia, and photos that you won't want to miss. All of this for just $20. That small check, a stamp, and an envelope is all it takes. Why not do it today? Or better yet, stop in for a visit and discover our extensive exhibits and massive collection of what you never knew about your community in the Wood County area. And while you want to be a proud member of our prize-winning organization.
Okay?